That morning started like 1,000 others in our high-rise condo on the 28th floor, overlooking the Houston skyline as it slowly woke from its slumber. The air was still cool with the last breath of the night dew slipping through the balcony window that I always intentionally left slightly ajar. I had always loved that atmosphere, the dense quiet. It was as if the enormous city was holding its breath for one moment before starting its endless hustle. I moved silently across the cool marble floor. It was a habit I'd developed over the years to keep from waking Demetrius, my husband, the center of my universe for the past 11 years. My morning routine was an almost comforting ritual. Brew a single espresso shot, pause on the balcony to feel the breeze on my face, and then head to the bathroom to get ready. Everything was on autopilot, movements my muscles and joints knew by heart. In the bathroom, decorated in tones of ivory and aged brass, I turned the hot water faucet to wash my face and started brushing my teeth. The mint toothpaste foam with its intense flavor filled my mouth. And then, amidst the monotonous movement of the brush, I saw it. Demetrius's cell phone was resting on the marble vanity next to the nearly empty bottle of liquid soap. Its screen, until then jet black, suddenly lit up, emitting a glow that hurt my eyes in the bathroom's gloom. A notification had popped up on the lock screen. It wasn't a message from his work group chat, nor a meeting reminder. The name written there was unfamiliar, a name I had never heard spoken from Demetrius's lips, Zara. And below that name, a short phrase, a phrase sufficient to stop my world. Can't wait for our weekend at the bungalow, the wine, and the luxury lingerie set I bought. Countdown begins. The movement of my hand froze instantly. The toothbrush was still in my mouth, but I felt nothing. The cool mint foam now tasted bitter and strange, slowly dissolving and dripping from the corner of my lips. My eyes were glued to the phone screen. I reread the sentence over and over, as if searching for a different meaning, an alternative possibility, room for a misunderstanding. Our bungalow, lingerie, every word was a nail sinking straight into my heart. Through the translucent glass door of the shower, I heard the sound of water running. Demetrius was showering. I heard him humming softly. It was an old New Orleans jazz tune he always played in the car. The sound of the falling water and his cheerful humming felt like a mockery. I was paralyzed here by the evidence of betrayal unfolded before my eyes with brutal clarity. And he, just steps away, was starting his day without a care, unaware that his world, our world, had just cracked irreversibly. The phone screen darkened again, but the sentence was already burned into my mind, etched onto my retina. I didn't need to unlock his phone. I didn't need to know more. What I felt in that moment wasn't an explosive shock, but rather a confirmation. The feeling that the final piece of a horrible puzzle I had been trying to ignore had finally clicked into place. For the past few months, there had been many small things that seemed off. Demetrius came home late more frequently, using sudden client meetings as an excuse. Unexpected business trips to Miami or the Pacific Northwest were announced with such little notice that I barely had time to ask for details. His phone, which he used to leave anywhere, was now always face down on the table or safely tucked away in his pocket, even when he went to the bathroom. His laptop, which I could use any time before, now had a new password. And what hurt the most was his gaze. His eyes, which had always looked at me with warmth, with the feeling of coming home, now often passed right by me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the apartment, like the painting on the wall that, after seeing it too many times, no longer draws attention. I often tried to comfort myself. "Don't be paranoid, Avia," I whispered to myself on sleepless nights while waiting for him. "Everyone gets tired. Marriage takes effort. Don't create problems out of nothing." Now, standing at the sink, with a mouth full of toothpaste, I wanted to go back in time and scream at myself. "Don't be stupid, Avia! Stop making excuses for him!" I turned on the faucet, quickly rinsed my mouth, and washed my face with cold water. My hands didn't tremble as I dried my face with a towel. Strangely, I felt empty, a cold, vast void. It was as if my soul had detached from my body and was observing everything from a corner of the room. I watched myself continue my routine. Apply moisturizer, a touch of powder, a neutral-toned lip gloss. The whole thing felt like a stage play. When I left the bathroom, Demetrius was already dressed. He stood in front of the large mirror in our bedroom, adjusting a navy blue tie. He saw me in the reflection and smiled. The same morning smile. A smile that now seemed like the most repulsive mask I had ever seen. "I have a client seminar in Miami this weekend, babe," he said while straightening his shirt collar. "Probably won't be back until Sunday evening. Will you be okay alone?" I nodded slowly. My voice came out flatter than I expected. No emotion, no tremor. "Sure. Don't forget to pack a heavy jacket. Miami nights can get chilly." I didn't ask about Zara. I didn't ask about the lingerie. I didn't want to ruin the stage play he had worked so hard to build, because in my cold, empty mind, something else was beginning to take shape. A plan, a script for the counterattack. And until everything was perfectly prepared, I wouldn't utter a single word. I too would play my part perfectly, just as he had been doing. That morning I became the best actress in the drama of his betrayal. I offered him the smile of an affectionate wife, even though the love that once burned in my heart was now cold ash, and from those ashes, something harder, something sharper began to grow. That night felt longer than usual. The hands of the wall clock seemed to move with exasperating slowness. Each tick-tock echoed in the apartment's silence. Demetrius arrived home on time with a box of pastries from my favorite bakery, a small gesture that, in other times, would have warmed my heart. But tonight, it felt like an empty formality, an attempt to cover his lies with the sweetness of chocolate and cream. We ate dinner together, chatting about trivial things, his work at the firm, a new project I was immersed in, the ever-worsening Dallas traffic. On the surface, everything seemed normal, the facade of a happy marriage that we had mastered so well. I became a meticulous observer. I watched as Demetrius placed his phone face down on the table, how his eyes occasionally darted toward the object, as if drawn by an invisible magnet. I watched his smile that never quite reached his eyes. Every small detail was more evidence, solidifying the certainty that had settled in my mind that morning. Demetrius had a custom. Every Thursday night after playing pickup basketball with his boys, he would come home, pour himself 2 fingers of whiskey, and go to bed. It was his ritual to unwind. I knew that after those 2 drinks, he would fall into a deep sleep, heavy as a stone, without dreaming, unaware of anything happening around him. Tonight was Thursday. A coincidence that felt like destiny. I waited until his breathing became regular and deep. A faint smell of whiskey mixed with the scent of soap in the fresh, air-conditioned air of the room. I lay beside him, staring at the dark bedroom ceiling, letting my frantically beating heart slowly return to its normal rhythm. It's time. Like a thief in my own house, I got out of bed with extreme care. I walked to his side of the bed. On the nightstand, his phone was charging, the white cable connected to the outlet like an umbilical cord, giving it life. I slowly unplugged it. I knew his fingerprint, his right index finger. For years, I had unlocked his phone to set an alarm or answer a call while he was driving. An act that was once based on trust was now the key to opening his Pandora's box. I took his limp hand. His skin was warm. For an instant, a fleeting memory assaulted me. The first time that hand held mine. So firm, so safe. I pushed the memory away quickly. This was no time for nostalgia. Gently, I placed the pad of his index finger on the phone's fingerprint sensor. Click. The screen lit up, revealing the perfectly organized apps. My heart thumped a little faster. There was no going back. I didn't go straight to the messaging app. I started with the photo gallery. I scrolled through hundreds of photos of us. Vacations in the Caribbean, my birthday party, candid shots he had taken of me without my knowledge. It all felt like relics of someone else's life. And then I found it, a hidden folder. It took me a couple of tries to guess the password. His birthday was too obvious. Inside was another world, the world of Demetrius and Zara. Selfies of them in the car, photos in dimly lit cafes, and the most painful one, a picture of the two of them in front of a rustic wooden bungalow that looked familiar. It was the property we had bought 2 years ago in the Poconos Mountains with my year-end bonus as an anniversary gift. The place where we were supposed to build our memories together. He was already building them, just not with me. There was even a photo of Zara alone, smiling at the camera with a triumphant look, wearing one of Demetrius's shirts. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. I swallowed it and kept going. After the photos, I opened the messaging app. Their conversation was a novel of betrayal, pet names, plans for secret dates, Demetrius's complaints about me, that I was too absorbed in my work, too cold, that I no longer cared about him. Every one of his sentences was a slap in the face. He was painting me as the villain in his story, making his affair look like my fault. And then I found more information about Zara. Her full name was Zara Dupree, a medical equipment representative for a large pharmaceutical company. And most importantly, in one of the oldest conversations, I found the phrase that would change everything. Elias will be in Singapore for work all next week. Our bungalow will be empty. Elias, her husband. So Zara was also a betrayer. This wasn't just a problem between Demetrius and me. There was another person hurting in this game, another person whose heart was being broken without their knowledge. In that instant, a bigger, bolder idea formed in my mind. This was no longer a wife's revenge. This was a matter of justice. I didn't sleep that night. With my hands now cold and resolute, I got to work. I took screenshots of all the key conversations, every photo in that hidden folder. I traced Demetrius's credit card transactions, which was linked to mine. Charges for hotels in Miami, on dates when he was supposed to have meetings, payments at expensive steakhouses we had never visited together. I saved everything, archiving it in a secret folder on my laptop. I became a detective in a single night, assembling the pieces of my husband's double life. At dawn, I found what I was looking for. I typed the name Elias Vance into LinkedIn and added the keyword architect that was mentioned in their conversations. And there he was. His profile photo showed a man with a strong jawline, slightly disheveled hair, and a smile that, though tired, seemed sincere. His profile indicated he was the director of an architectural firm specializing in sustainable design. In my heart, I felt a pang of compassion for this man. He was a victim, just like me. I sat in front of my laptop in the dark living room, illuminated only by the screen's glow. I wrote a short message, deleted it, and rewrote it, doing it dozens of times, searching for the right words. Finally, I stopped thinking and just let my fingers move. Hello, Mr. Vance. My name is Avia Kincaid. I am convinced that my husband, Demetrius, is having an affair with your wife, Zara. If you are interested, I can share the evidence I have. This is my number. I stared at the sentence for several minutes. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. I took a long, deep breath and pressed it. The message was sent. Demetrius's phone was already back in its spot, as if no one had touched it. The morning sun was beginning to peek out from behind the skyscrapers. A new day had begun, and my war was about to start. The time that followed the click of the send button crawled by with exasperating slowness. Every second was like a grain of sand refusing to fall in the hourglass. I returned to the bedroom, put Demetrius's phone exactly back where it was, and went out to the living room. I sat on the plush sofa, but my body was stiff. The morning coffee, normally delicious, now only left a sour taste on my tongue. Through the window, Houston began to stir. The distant sound of a car horn, the murmur of engines starting. Everything sounded distant and muted, as if I were inside a soundproof bubble. I clenched my phone in my hand. It felt heavy, like a grenade whose pin had just been pulled. I could only wait. Wait for the explosion, or the worst possibility, that nothing would happen. What if Elias didn't believe me? What if he thought I was a crazy, jealous woman trying to destroy his marriage? Or worse, what if he called Zara to confirm and Zara told Demetrius? My plan would crumble before it even started. I would be left looking like a fool. a pathetic figure. Thoughts fluttered in my head like a flock of crows. I tried to chase them away by turning on the television, opening my laptop to check work emails, but it was useless. My focus was shattered. The numbers on the spreadsheets, which usually seemed so clean and logical, now seemed to dance senselessly. Avia Kincaid, the chief financial officer known for her composure and ability to control the most complex situations, now felt she had lost control of the only thing that truly mattered, her own life. 3 hours later, Demetrius came out of the room. He wore a crisp blue shirt, his wet hair slicked back. He gave me a light kiss on the forehead, a gesture so automatic that I barely felt it. "I'm heading out now," he said. "I'll call you when I get to Miami." "Be careful," I replied, forcing a smile. As he walked toward the door, I felt an overwhelming urge to scream at him, to confront him with all his lies right then and there. But I restrained myself. Hot, explosive anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. Mine was a cold, frozen rage that I was sharpening into a weapon. After Demetrius left, the condo felt even quieter and emptier. I spent the morning wandering from the living room to the kitchen and back to the living room. Every time my phone vibrated with an email notification or a message from the work group, my heart jumped into my throat. 3 hours felt like 3 years. I was about to give up, to convince myself it had been a stupid idea, when the phone finally rang. An unknown number appeared on the screen. My hand trembled slightly as I slid the green icon. I stepped onto the balcony to get some fresh air and calm my racing heart. "Hello?" I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. There was silence on the other end, only heavy breathing. Then a man's voice, deep and tired, replied, "This is Elias Vance. I received your message." His voice was exactly as I had imagined it, calm on the surface, but I could feel an underlying tremor, the trembling of foundations that had just cracked. "Thank you for calling," I said. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked bluntly. No pleasantries. I liked that. "I wish it were," I replied. My throat felt dry. "But I'm afraid it's not. I have proof, messages, photos, even their plans for this weekend." I heard him let out a long sigh, the sigh of someone whose world had just been turned upside down. "This weekend, Zara told me she was going to the Poconos with some coworkers for a corporate retreat." His voice sounded more like he was talking to himself than to me. "My husband told me he was going to a client seminar in Miami," I countered. "They are meeting at our bungalow in the Poconos." The mention of the Poconos seemed to hit him like a punch. The silence on the other end grew thicker. The bungalow that I had purchased, the bungalow he had perhaps designed, both of us betrayed in a space that rightfully belonged to us. "What do you want?" he finally asked. His words were loaded with hesitation. This was the deciding moment. I took a deep breath and summoned all my courage. "I want us to meet them there, together, before they have time to uncork the wine or take off their jackets." Silence again. I could imagine Elias on the other end of the line weighing my words. A crazy request, a movie scenario. I was prepared for him to refuse, to think I was nuts. "I don't want a scene," he said after a moment. "No yelling." "Me neither," I replied quickly. "I just want them to see us, to face the truth without room for more lies or excuses." I heard his breathing again. I could feel the internal conflict he was fighting, the desire to run from this bitter reality versus the desire to face it head on. "All right," he finally said. That single word sounded heavy, laden with resignation and determination. "But let's meet first. I want to see everything you know with my own eyes." A wave of relief washed over me, making my knees feel weak. I wasn't alone. I had an ally. "Of course," I said. "When and where?" We agreed to meet the next day, Saturday morning, at a small diner in a service area on I-80, a neutral spot halfway between our separate worlds. After hanging up, I stood on the balcony, contemplating the city of Houston, now in full swing. My mood had shifted. The emptiness I had felt that morning was now filled with a clear purpose, a strange alliance forged in shared pain. We were two strangers, united by betrayal, and we were going to face this storm together. On Saturday morning, the sky was gray, as if even the weather felt the tension in the air. I drove alone along the busy interstate. The music that normally accompanied me on my trips now seemed like an annoying distraction, so I turned off the radio. The only sound was the tires on the asphalt and the faint hum of the engine. My mind was a beehive, running through all possible scenarios, everything that could happen when I met Elias. I arrived at the service area half an hour before the agreed time. It was quite busy, full of families heading out on vacation and travelers stopping to rest. I chose a discreet little diner in a corner. I ordered a black coffee and picked a table in a corner that offered a perfect view of the entrance. I could see everyone who came and went. Every time the diner door opened, my heart beat a little faster. At 10 o'clock sharp, a tall man in a tan jacket walked in. His stride was determined, but his shoulders were slightly slumped, as if carrying an invisible weight. I recognized him instantly from his profile picture, Elias. The weariness in his eyes was much more real in person. He looked around, and his eyes met mine. There was a flash of recognition. I gave him a small nod. He walked over to my table and sat in the chair across from me without a word, without formal greetings, without introductions. We already knew each other in the strangest and most painful way possible. "Get something," I offered, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. He shook his head. "No, thank you. Let's get straight to it." I sighed and took my phone out of my purse. I placed it on the table, between my coffee cup and a small bottle of hand sanitizer. I opened the gallery, navigated to the folder I had prepared, and slid it toward him. "It's all here," I said in a low voice. Elias stared at the phone for a moment before picking it up. His hands were large and firm. An architect's hands, the hands of someone who builds things. The irony was cruel. The hands that had built so much now had to hold the evidence of something demolished. He started scrolling with his thumb across the screen. I watched his face carefully. I saw his jaw clench as he read the affectionate messages between Demetrius and Zara. I saw a small muscle in his temple pulse as he looked at the selfies of the two of them, smiling happily. I saw him hold his breath as he viewed the credit card charge proofs, hotel rooms, and romantic dinners. But his biggest reaction came with one photo in particular, a picture of Zara posing on the deck of the Poconos bungalow. I saw his hand grip the phone. His knuckles turned white as his eyes fixed on the details of the background, the wooden beams he had chosen, the design of the railing, the floor tiles. In that moment, I knew he wasn't just seeing a picture of his unfaithful wife. He was seeing betrayal within his own masterpiece. He was seeing the lie desecrating a space he had created with his own sweat and imagination. He placed the phone back on the table very slowly, as if it were fragile glass. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for an instant, and let out an incredibly heavy sigh. "I picked out those floor tiles myself," he muttered hoarsely. "Every small detail of that bungalow was chosen by me. Zara used to say she didn't like going much, that it was too quiet." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Turns out she just didn't like going with me." Silence enveloped our table. I gave him time to process everything. I knew that pain, the pain of realizing that a place you considered sacred has been defiled. "I suspected it," he said again, his gaze lost on the window. She had been distant for a long time, getting angry over silly things. She refused to talk seriously, to go to marriage counseling. She always said I worked too much, that I didn't have time for her. Now I understand. She didn't need my time because she was dedicating all of it to someone else. It was my turn to share Demetrius's story, how the small lies had accumulated to form a mountain, my ignored feelings, how our financial situation was strained by Demetrius's lavish lifestyle, a fact he was unaware of. We talked for almost an hour, not as two strangers, but as two people in the same boat, trapped together in the storm of betrayal. We were no longer alone. "I still have a spare key to the bungalow," Elias said suddenly. His eyes were now fixed on mine with a new glint, one of determination. Zara doesn't know I kept it. Demetrius thinks I'm on a business trip to Barbados this weekend. He'd never imagine I'm anywhere near the Poconos. Then we'll go first, Elias said. We'll wait for them there. But like I said, no yelling, no scenes. We'll just be sitting. We'll let them see us, and let the truth do the rest. I completely agreed. Our plan now felt real, tangible. We settled on the details. They would arrive around 6 o'clock the next evening. We would be there from the morning setting our stage. We would be the audience and the protagonists of the final act of our marriages. When we parted ways in front of the diner, there was no handshake or a lengthy farewell, just a brief nod, a silent understanding. We were partners in this painful mission. Driving back home, I felt strange. My burden wasn't lighter, but I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. There was someone else who understood, someone else who would stand by my side when the storm broke. The sky was still gray, but I thought I saw a faint ray of light in the distance, not the light of hope for fixing something that was already broken, but the light of a definitive ending. And for now, that was enough. On Sunday morning, I left Houston when the sky was still a pale violet hue. The roads were clear, which allowed me to drive in a silence accompanied only by my thoughts. As I left the city behind, the air entering through the slightly open window became cleaner. I started to smell the salty scent of the ocean mixed with the aroma of pine trees. The Poconos, the place that was supposed to be a refuge, a keeper of sweet memories. Now it felt like the battleground I was heading toward. The bungalow was slightly isolated, at the end of a small winding road surrounded by lush forest. When I turned onto the gravel driveway, I saw it. A 2-story log structure that seemed to blend into the surrounding nature. Beautiful, serene, and full of lies. I parked my SUV next to a silver sedan that was already there. Elias's car. He had already arrived. My heart beat a little faster. It was real. All of this was really happening. I grabbed my purse from the passenger seat and, after a long, calming breath, I got out. The Poconos' morning air was cool and slightly humid. In the distance, the sound of waves breaking provided a melancholic soundtrack. The bungalow door wasn't locked. I pushed it open slowly and entered. Elias was standing in front of the large living room window that faced the lake. He held a coffee mug from which a thin stream of steam rose. He didn't turn when I entered, as if he had already felt my presence. "Have you been here long?" My voice was a little hoarse. "An hour or so," he replied, still looking at the lake. I needed a moment to see this place again. I understood what he meant. I put my purse on one of the armchairs and walked over to him to contemplate the same landscape. The lake was calm that morning, a steely gray color. Beside him, I remembered being at this exact spot with Demetrius 3 years earlier, after I had a miscarriage. Demetrius had held me tightly. He had promised me that we would get through everything together, that this place would be the witness to how we would rebuild our happiness. That promise now felt like poison. "The last time I was here was 3 years ago," I said quietly, more to myself than to Elias, "after we lost our first child." Elias finally turned to look at me. In his tired eyes, there was now a glimmer of compassion. Not condescending compassion, but the compassion of someone who knows the meaning of loss. "Zara wanted children desperately too," he said softly. "After 2 failed attempts at IVF, she stopped talking about it. I thought it was because she was too sad. Turns out, her mind was elsewhere." We sank back into silence, each lost in our own pain. There were no tears, only a heavy stillness, full of unspoken words and broken promises. In that silence, we found a strange bond. We weren't friends or even acquaintances. We were 2 wounded souls standing on the ruins of our marriages, trying to find a way not to crumble together. "Do you think we're going too far?" A small doubt crept into my mind. Elias slowly shook his head, his gaze back on the lake. No. Maybe if this were just about revenge, but it's not. It's about forcing them to face reality without filters. It's about reclaiming the truth they stole from us. His words strengthened me. Yes, he was right. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about stopping our own pain. It was about closing a chapter in a way that left no questions unanswered, no room for further manipulation. Then let's set the stage, I said, my voice now firmer. We got moving, not like hosts preparing a party, but like two forensic investigators reconstructing the scene of a crime. Every one of our movements was charged with meaning, a silent ritual. I started by cleaning the long wooden table in the center of the room, the table where Demetrius and Zara had probably often sat, planning their next lie. I scrubbed the surface until it shined, as if trying to erase the trace of their betrayal. Elias went to his car and came back with a bottle of Merlot. Zara's favorite, he said, placing the bottle in the center of the table. A small detail that hurt immensely. I took 4 crystal glasses from the kitchen cabinet, the same glasses Demetrius always insisted on using every time we came here, part of his ritual to show off his good taste. I placed them on the table, perfectly aligned, 2 on one side, 2 on the other. A perfect formation for a confrontation. We adjusted the position of 2 large armchairs so they faced away from the entrance. That way, when they walked in, they would have no choice but to walk around them and meet us head on. We wouldn't ambush them from behind. We would wait for them face to face. The room's lighting was adjusted to be warm, yellowish, not too bright to create tension, but clear enough to capture every nuance of expression that would later appear on their faces. We wanted to see everything. The surprise, the guilt, the fear. How do you think they'll react? I asked as we sat down for a moment to contemplate our work. The room looked so normal, so peaceful, a perfect trap. Elias shook his head. Zara will cry. It's her weapon. Demetrius? I don't know. He might get mad, he might beg. But one thing I'm sure of, neither of them will be prepared for the fact that we know everything. They won't be prepared for us. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, no longer about the betrayal, but about ourselves. I told him about my dream of opening a small bookstore in San Diego, a dream Demetrius had always scoffed at, calling it unrealistic. Elias told me about how he was once close to leaving architecture to go to France to study pastry making. We talked about the versions of ourselves that we had lost long ago, buried under layers of compromises and sacrifices in our marriages. Outside, the sky slowly began to turn orange. The wall clock struck 5 o'clock. Less than 2 hours, I said softly. Are you afraid? Elias asked. I looked him in the eyes. I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm afraid of forgiving something that doesn't deserve to be forgiven. He nodded slowly. We walked out onto the deck and stood side by side, watching the sunset. The lake breeze blew gently, bringing with it the smell of pine and quietness. Time seemed to have stopped. We were ready. The stage was set. Now all that was missing was the arrival of the principal actors. At 5:57 p.m., the air inside the bungalow was so thick and tense that it felt like a guitar string about to snap. Elias and I were sitting silently in the 2 armchairs we had prepared, facing away from the entrance. We were like 2 statues waiting for the performance to begin. On the table between us, the bottle of Merlot stood tall, flanked by the 2 empty crystal glasses. On the armchair next to me rested a thick manila envelope. Inside was all the ammunition we needed: copies of their conversations, printouts of the credit card statements, even a brief recording of a call with Demetrius's secretary, who casually confirmed that there was no seminar scheduled in Miami this weekend. We hadn't come empty-handed. Then we heard it, the crunch of gravel under the tires of a car. The sound was so loud in the silence that it pierced straight into my heart. Elias turned to look at me, his eyes asked without words. I didn't say anything. I just nodded briefly and firmly. It was time. A black Range Rover pulled up right in front of the deck. We could see it clearly through the large windows. Demetrius was the first to get out of the driver's side. He wore a leather jacket, a small suitcase in one hand, and a gift bag in the other. He looked relaxed, happy. Immediately after, Zara stepped out of the passenger door. She carried a bouquet of pale pink tulips. They were laughing together. The sound of their laughter, cheerful and carefree, reached us faintly from outside. They looked like a newly married couple arriving at their small paradise. The sight was like a knife in my gut. The illusion of their happiness built upon our pain. The key turned in the lock. The wooden door opened with a slight creak. Zara walked in first. The smile still on her face, she stepped elegantly into the room. Her eyes scanned the room, and then her smile froze. It literally froze halfway, as if someone had hit the pause button on her life. Her eyes, once bright, widened, filled with confusion, and then terror, as her gaze moved from me to Elias, sitting beside me. Demetrius, who was following her, bumped into her back as she stopped suddenly. "What's wrong, babe?" His voice still sounded cheerful. Then he lifted his head, following Zara's gaze. And in that instant, our eyes met. I saw the change happen in a matter of seconds. The confusion, the shock, the denial, and finally a panic so pure it was palpable. The gift bag slipped from his hand. A bottle of Dom Perignon that was inside rolled across the wooden floor and crashed against the table leg. Pop! A small burst, followed by the sound of foam spilling, filling the room with a sharp, alcoholic scent. Zara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The bouquet of tulips slid from her fingers. The delicate pink petals scattered across the floor. It was a perfect visual metaphor for what had just occurred. Their fantasy shattered. The silence, broken by the sound of the champagne, returned heavier, more suffocating than before. I let the moment linger for a few seconds, letting them fully realize their situation. Then I spoke. "Welcome to your weekend getaway." My voice came out light as a breeze, serene, in total contrast to the electric atmosphere. "We've set out the wine, the seats, and the truth." Demetrius was paralyzed, his lips pressed into a hard line, his face pale. Zara took half a step back, glancing toward Elias, as if seeking help, an escape from this nightmare. But there was no escape. There was nowhere to hide. The curtain had been raised. The show was about to begin. The fragments of the broken champagne bottle sparkled on the wooden floor, reflecting the warm light of the room. The sharp smell of alcohol now mixed with the aroma of the trampled, wilting tulips. In the midst of that small chaos, the four of us remained frozen, trapped in a surreal tableau. The first to move was Demetrius, the first to try to piece together a reality that had just exploded into 1,000 shards. "Avia," he began, his voice raspy. He took a step forward, raising a hand as if trying to calm me, as if I were a wild animal that needed to be tamed. This is not what it looks like." A small, dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. The cliché phrase, "the first defense of every caught cheater." "Oh, really?" I said, tilting my head slightly. "Then what should it look like? Explain it to me, Demetrius. What should I think of Zara's message saying she was eagerly awaiting you in our bungalow, or that luxury lingerie set she had prepared especially for you?" Demetrius's face crumbled. He clearly hadn't expected me to know such specific details. His eyes darted toward Zara, a look of pure panic. I continued, my voice as calm and flat as a prosecutor reading the charges. "What should I think of the credit card charges at expensive steakhouses we've never been to together? Or the record of the Uber ride that took you to Zara's neighborhood at an hour when you were supposedly working late at the office?" Every question was a direct hit. I knew it by the way his shoulders slumped, by the way he avoided my gaze. It was Elias's turn to stand up. He didn't look at Demetrius. His eyes were fixed on his wife Zara, who was trembling near the door. "And me, Zara," Elias said, his voice deep and shaking with contained emotion. "What am I supposed to think? You told me you were going on a corporate retreat in the Poconos with your co-workers. You even sent me a text last night, just before turning off your phone, that said, 'Good night, missing you.' I bet you did, I mumbled under my breath. Elias's question shattered Zara's defenses. The tears she had been holding back finally burst out. She covered her face with both hands and broke into sobs. "Elias, please don't do this," she managed to say between sobs. "Don't do what?" Elias's voice rose an octave, his pain now audible. "Don't stand here and confront you? Don't listen to the truth? Don't see my wife cheating on me in the house I built with my own hands?" That last phrase was a low blow, even for me. This house was his creation. Every corner was the embodiment of his art and his love, and they had profaned it. I walked to the table and picked up the thick manila envelope I had prepared. I didn't open it. I simply dropped it onto the table with a loud enough noise to command their attention. "I didn't come here to argue," I said, my voice taking control of the room again. "I came with facts." Demetrius looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. In a fit of anger and desperation, he snatched it and tore it open abruptly. He pulled out a stack of papers. I watched as his eyes quickly scanned the lines, how his expression changed as he saw the transcripts of their own conversations, the photographic evidence, the financial reports. His eyes, previously full of panic, now reddened with fury. A few seconds later, he threw the papers to the floor. "Have you been spying on me?" he shouted, finally losing control. I looked him straight in the eyes without flinching. "I didn't spy on you, Demetrius. I confirmed the truth. A truth I had suspected for too long, and because you were so meticulous in your lies, I had to be even more meticulous to find it." Zara had collapsed into one of the dining chairs, her body racked by sobs. Elias didn't move to comfort her. He stood there, observing his wife with a mix of disappointment, rage, and a deep sadness. "How long?" Elias asked Zara. His voice had returned to its deep tone, but now it sounded colder. 7 months, Zara whispered. 7 months. 210 days of lies. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. During those 7 months, I had still been trying to be a good wife, trying to fix what felt wrong in our marriage, unaware that I was fighting alone. Demetrius approached me again, this time with a pleading look. "Avia, I was wrong. I know I made a terrible mistake, but that doesn't mean I stopped loving you." I took a step back, creating distance between us. "Stop," I said, and my voice trembled for the first time, not out of sadness, but out of an anger that was finally reaching its climax. "Don't talk to me about love, Demetrius. If the kind of love you're talking about is the one that allows you to cheat on me with another woman, I don't want it." I paused, letting a bitter memory surface as I looked around the room. "And if the love you talk about is the one that allows you to bring your mistress to the very place where we lost our child, then you can keep it for yourself." My words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The room fell into complete silence. Even Zara's sobs ceased. I saw Demetrius freeze, his face as if he had been slapped. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. That memory, our deepest wound, was the ultimate weapon he could never fight against. I gave him one last look. "You can leave now, or you can sit and listen until the end. But if you think there is still a chance for forgiveness, then you have no idea who I am." Elias turned to Zara and then looked at me. "I need some air." I nodded. "Me too." The two of us walked out, passing by Demetrius and Zara, who were still nailed to their spots. We walked onto the deck, leaving them amidst the wreckage of the lies we had just detonated. Outside, the Pocono sky was almost dark. The lake seemed to roar louder than before. The storm had just begun. After a few minutes on the deck, letting the fresh air clear our heads, we returned to the living room. The atmosphere inside was that of a post-war scene. Demetrius and Zara were now sitting in separate chairs, far apart, not looking at each other. The papers with the evidence of their betrayal were scattered on the floor like fallen dry leaves. The air was heavy with regret and the painful truth. I dragged a dining chair and placed it directly in front of Demetrius. Elias sat beside me, his gaze fixed, cold, and direct on Zara. No one spoke for a long time until I placed a second dossier on the table. This one was blue, unlike the manila envelope from before. I felt the atmosphere change instantly. Demetrius, I began, my eyes locked on his. Have you ever told Zara why we've had separate bank accounts for the past 6 years? Demetrius's body tensed. He looked at me with a pleading expression. Avia, that has nothing to do with this. I'll tell it, I interrupted him, giving him no opportunity to excuse himself. I turned my gaze to Zara, who was now looking at me with a confused expression. You probably don't know this, Zara, but this man you admire so much, Demetrius, racked up more than $50,000 in gambling debt back in 2018. His parents had to secretly pay it off to save his career. After that, I had to separate our finances, not out of distrust, but because I saw firsthand how well he could hide something so huge. The shock on Zara's face was genuine. Avia, you never told me about that, because it has nothing to do with today, Demetrius snapped. Yes, it does, I countered calmly. All of this has to do with lies. Demetrius, you justified your affair by telling your mistress I was too busy, too cold. But you forgot to mention to her that I'm the one who's been bearing most of our financial burden. I've been paying the mortgage on this bungalow every month while you gambled and lied behind my back. Demetrius lowered his head deeply. He had nothing more to say. My truth had disarmed all his excuses. Now it was Elias's turn. His voice, firm but glacial, was directed at Zara. And you, Zara, you told me the bank was delaying the loan approval to fix the roof of our house, but you actually transferred nearly $10,000 to a rehab facility in New Jersey. The beneficiary? Jamal Dupree, your brother, right? Zara was speechless. Her face turned even paler. I didn't want to worry you. No, Elias said. You didn't want to share the truth. You've been living 2 lives, one with me and one with Demetrius. And the worst part is, both were built on secrets. You lied to me about your family's problems, and I'm sure you didn't tell Demetrius either. The room fell silent again. I nodded slowly. That's the only thing you have in common, I said, looking alternately at Demetrius and Zara. You've never been truthful. Not with us, your spouses, nor even with each other. You've only shown a neatly packaged version of yourselves that you thought the other person would like. Zara began to cry again. I never wanted things to get this far. But you let it happen, I countered. I don't know what's more painful, being betrayed, or realizing that the person who betrayed you doesn't even have the guts to admit they were wrong from the start. Demetrius lifted his head. His eyes were red, exhausted. Avia, he said, none of this is worth breaking up our marriage over. We had a lot of good memories. There was his last card, the memories. It's true, Demetrius, I said. We had a lot of good memories. But the fact that you chose to trade them all for the ambiguous thrill of an affair with someone who wasn't even honest with her own husband means I must protect the rest of my life from your poor decisions. Elias turned to Zara and then looked at me. I need to take a break. Me too, I said. Just then, when it seemed all the cards of the lie were on the table, when we thought nothing else could surprise us, Zara suddenly stood up. Her hands gripped the edge of the chair. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in them, a mix of fear and confusion. There's something else I haven't said. Her voice trembled. All eyes focused on her. Elias frowned. Demetrius looked at her suspiciously. Zara swallowed hard. Her eyes darted to Demetrius and then landed on me. I'm pregnant. The room fell into absolute silence. So absolute that the tick-tock of the wooden wall clock sounded deafening. Every second was like a blade slicing the air. Demetrius jumped out of his chair. What? What did you say? Zara nodded, her lips trembling. I found out last week. I was going to tell you here this weekend. She looked at Demetrius as she said the last phrase. Elias was frozen. His face was unreadable. Then he asked in a voice that was almost a whisper, Is it mine? Zara turned to him, tears streaming down her cheeks again. Yes, I'm sure. Demetrius and I were always careful. My world seemed to tilt. For a few seconds, my mind went blank. No one had prepared us for this. There was no script. There was no plan to deal with the ticking time bomb that had just exploded in the middle of us. The arrival of an unborn life changed the entire dynamic of this confrontation into something much more complex, much more painful. The first to recover from the shock was Demetrius, but his reaction wasn't that of a man who had just discovered his mistress was pregnant. There was surprise, yes, but what dominated was horror and disdain. His eyes moved quickly from Zara's face to her belly and back to her face. "You're pregnant with him?" he asked. His voice choked. He pointed at Elias with his chin. There was something in his tone, in the way he pronounced him with such contempt, as if this pregnancy were an annoying complication, a stain on their perfect escape. And for the first time that night, I saw a flash of strength in Zara. Between the sobs and the swollen face, she shot Demetrius a sharp look. "Don't call him him," she hissed. "He has a name. It's Elias, my husband. And yes, I was wrong to betray him, but at least I never lied to him about my feelings for you." Zara's words were a double slap for Demetrius. The first, the confirmation that the baby was not his. The second, the implicit accusation that Demetrius's love for me was nothing more than a lie. I watched Demetrius take a step back, his face now an unreadable mask. Shock, shame, or perhaps the complete emptiness of someone who realizes they have lost everything. He had lost me, and apparently he had never truly had Zara. She had only been a stopover, a temporary escape. While the three of them were trapped in this new drama, I felt something strange. Clarity. Zara's pregnancy was a shock, but for me, it changed nothing. It was their problem. It was the consequence of their actions. Their chaos was no longer my chaos. This complicated knot that had just formed, in fact, solidified my decision to cut the threads that tied me to all of them. I took a deep breath, calming the pulse that had sped up for a moment. I was the Avia I knew again, the calm, methodical CFO, always focused on the bottom line. "I think we've had enough surprises for one night." My voice cut the tension between them. I leaned forward and picked up my purse from the floor. I opened it and pulled out one last dossier, a maroon-colored one. I slowly placed it on the coffee table next to the still intact bottle of wine. And since everything is out in the open, I'm not going to prolong this. I opened the dossier. Inside was a perfectly organized stack of papers. "This is the divorce petition and all the financial documentation I've prepared," I explained. "Our joint assets have already been legally transferred to separate accounts. Everything has been verified by my attorney. Unlike some people in this room, I haven't hidden anything." Demetrius looked at the papers in disbelief. "Avia, you can read them now or refuse to sign," I continued, ignoring the plea in his voice. "But you will not change my decision." Across the room, Zara had sat down again. Her hands instinctively cradled her belly. Elias turned to her. The coldness of his face slowly dissolved, replaced by an expression of weariness and resignation. "I need time to process all of this," he told Zara, his voice deep but controlled. "But if you have that baby, I'll take care of it. The child isn't at fault." I saw a glimmer of relief on Zara's face. She nodded, too choked up with sobs to speak. "I know. Thank you for saying that." I looked back at Demetrius. "I don't know if you have anything left to say, but if so, this is the time." He lifted his head. His eyes were red, exhausted. "Avia," he said, "none of this is worth breaking up our marriage over. We had a lot of good memories." I nodded. "That's true, Demetrius. We had a lot of good memories. But the fact that you chose to trade them all for the ambiguous thrill of an affair with someone who wasn't even honest with her own husband means I must protect the rest of my life from your bad decisions." I took a pen from my jacket pocket. With a firm motion, I signed all the pages that required my signature. In the silent room, the sound of the pen tip on the paper was sharp. Every stroke was a release. I was no longer clinging to a fragile marriage. I was no longer pretending to trust someone who didn't deserve my confidence. When I put the pen down, I felt lighter than I had felt in years. I looked at Demetrius, the man who was once all my youth, the dream of my family. "Good luck," I told him. "You're going to need it." When I stood up, Elias also rose. He gave me a small, respectful nod. "I'll wait for you in the car, Ms. Kincaid. If you need anything, let me know." I nodded, grateful for his serene presence that night. Just as I was about to leave, Zara approached me hesitantly. "I know I don't deserve to ask for forgiveness," she said quietly, "but I truly never wanted things to go this far." I looked her directly in the eyes. There was no anger anymore, only clarity. "The most dangerous people aren't the ones who are openly bad," I told her. "They're the ones who tell themselves they're good people while living a lie." She froze for a moment at my words, and then turned away. I walked out of the bungalow without looking back, leaving Demetrius staring at the papers on the table, and Zara huddled in a corner, clutching the only thing she could hold on to. The life she had just admitted was growing inside her. We left the bungalow around 9 o'clock that night. No one said goodbye to us. It wasn't necessary. We walked in silence. Only the crunch of the gravel under our shoes broke the night's stillness. Elias opened the car door for me, a gesture of courtesy that felt strange amidst so much chaos. Then he got into the driver's seat. Before starting the engine, he turned to me. "Are you hungry?" he asked quietly. "I know a small spot in downtown Scranton that's open late. It's nothing fancy, but their soul food is incredible." I laughed, a raspy, unexpected laugh, but one that felt very real. After all the drama, all the tears and lies, that simple question felt overwhelmingly normal. "Yes," I replied. "Let's go. I'm starving." We sat side by side in the modest restaurant, illuminated by a neon sign that flickered slightly. A warm yellow light illuminated the worn wooden table in front of us. We didn't try to analyze what had just happened. Instead, we talked about more peaceful things. The time Elias considered leaving architecture for a pastry school, or my dream of opening a cafe bookstore in San Diego, an idea I had abandoned after Demetrius dismissed it as unrealistic. After dinner, we said goodbye with a simple handshake and a silent nod. We didn't become lovers, but I knew that night that I had gained something more fundamental, a friend, someone who had walked with me through the darkest night of my life. 6 months later, I was standing on the balcony of a small house in San Diego, California. I had a mug of hot ginger tea in my hands. I watched the waves roll toward the beach. The divorce from Demetrius was finalized in less than 2 months. Thanks to my meticulous preparation, the documentation, the evidence, and the clearly defined assets, he didn't put up much resistance. He probably knew he had more to lose the longer the process dragged on. I received the majority of our assets, including a cash settlement for the Poconos bungalow, which I sold back to him. I didn't need a place filled with the ghosts of the past. Demetrius's career at the financial firm stalled. His boss, a strict but fair executive, somehow learned about the chaos of his personal life. Nothing was ever mentioned officially, but he was slowly sidelined from important projects. From being a candidate for the next CEO position, he was demoted to overseeing a second-tier team. Zara gave birth last week. Elias sent me a text. "She's here, a healthy baby girl. Feelings are complicated, but we're trying." He attached a photo, a tiny hand clinging to Zara's finger. Elias looked at the camera with a tenderness I had never seen in him before. I didn't know if they would ever get back together as a couple, but it was clear that, however late, they were learning to be honest with each other and with themselves. I, meanwhile, live alone in my new house by the ocean, not too far from the hustle and bustle, but quiet enough to hear the sound of the wind every morning. I changed careers. I am no longer a CFO, but a freelance financial consultant working on my own schedule. No more intense meetings, no more midnight email bombardments. I'm also learning to stop, to rest, to breathe. Elias and I still keep in touch, not frequently but consistently. Sometimes just a holiday greeting, sometimes a message that says, "I just saw a beautiful French-style villa design in La Jolla, and it reminded me of you." It's a marvel. And sometimes just a 15-minute call to ask, "How are you?" I don't need more. We went through one of the longest nights of our lives together, and although neither of us has said it, I know we are friends, the kind of friendship that doesn't need labels, that is understood with just a look. That afternoon, I sat on my patio with my favorite book while a relaxing piece of smooth jazz played on a small speaker next to me. I no longer thought about Demetrius. There was no more pain or regret, only a peace as calm as the ocean on a windless day. I survived what once seemed impossible, and most importantly, I found myself again. Demetrius was an important part of my world, but he was not my final destination. He entered my life to give me a very expensive lesson, to wake me up and make me understand that trust should not be handed over to those who don't know how to guard it, that love doesn't last when honesty disappears, and that blind sacrifice only makes us forget our own worth. If someone asked me now, Avia, do you regret anything? I would answer without hesitation, no, because some people don't come into our lives to stay, but to teach us when it's time to walk away. My story is not a tragedy. It is a journey of rebirth. From a betrayed wife, I became a woman who stood firm, healed herself, and learned to love herself again. Sometimes losing something clears the way for something much better, and I'm grateful to have had the courage to leave at the most crucial moment. 3 years. A time that feels like an entire lifetime, yet also like just yesterday. I was sitting on my garden porch with a mug of Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee and a half-filled notebook. From here, I could see my small vegetable patch, the cherry tomatoes growing exuberantly, the bell peppers starting to turn red, and the basil leaves releasing their fresh scent every time the breeze blew. In the distance, the Pacific Ocean stretched out vast and deep blue under the clear morning sky. 3 years ago today, I was sitting in a bungalow in the Poconos, waiting to detonate my own world. Today, I am sitting here in the new world I have rebuilt on the ruins, and this world feels much more solid, more real. I don't think about Demetrius often anymore, not because I deliberately avoid it, but because he no longer occupies space in my mind. The memory of him has become like an old movie I once watched. I know the plot, I remember a few scenes, but the emotions that were once so intense are now muted, replaced by a safe distance. A few months ago, an old friend from Houston sent me a text. She had run into Demetrius by chance at a real estate fair. She told me he looked different, thinner, quieter. He had left his old firm a year after our divorce and was now working for a smaller developer in Atlanta. He had moved cities, starting over. I read the message without feeling anything. No satisfaction for his karma, no residual pain, just a serene acknowledgement. His story was no longer mine. He was a stranger who once shared my bed for years. I prayed for him to find peace, not for him, but for me, because wishing him peace meant I was truly free. My connection with Elias has endured, transforming into a genuine and uncommon friendship. We video call once a month. His call came as I was watering my plants. His face appeared on the screen, still with that characteristic tired smile, but now his eyes had a sparkle that wasn't there before. Behind him, a little girl with curly hair was running and laughing. "Our Nora, she just learned to pronounce your name correctly," Elias said with a small smile as Nora hugged his leg. "It took her 2.5 years to decide if I was Elias or Lay. "You look happy," I smiled. "She is my world," Elias replied. He paused, his gaze turning more serious. "Zara and I tried. We are good parents to Nora. But as a couple, we realized that you can't fix what's broken. We decided to separate amicably 6 months ago. It's better this way, more honest. No more secrets, no more pretense, just a partnership to raise our daughter." The news didn't surprise me. Some cracks are too deep to be repaired. "I'm sorry, but I'm glad you found an honest path," I said. "Yes, honesty," he said. "An expensive lesson." "And you, Avia?" he asked. "Has any lucky man managed to steal your heart on that island of the gods?" "My heart isn't available to be stolen right now," I replied. "I'm too busy owning it myself, and it feels incredibly good." My work as a financial consultant has given me a new purpose. I don't just help newly divorced women reorganize their finances. I listen to their stories. I see in their eyes the same fear I once felt. Fear of the future, fear of loneliness. And I can tell them with complete conviction, you're going to be fine. You are much stronger than you think, because I am the proof. I have become a beacon for ships that were once trapped in the same storm as me. I have turned my scars into a map for others to find their way back to themselves. When the sun began to descend toward the west, I closed my notebook and walked toward the beach in front of my house. I took off my sandals, letting the warm sand touch my soles and the ocean foam dampen them. I am often asked, "Have you forgiven Demetrius?" For a long time I didn't know the answer, but now I understand. Forgiveness was not the goal. I didn't need to grant him my forgiveness to heal. What I needed was acceptance, to accept that everything happened, to accept that I was once so deeply wounded, to accept that that pain changed me, and most importantly, to forgive myself. Forgive myself for not having seen the signs earlier. Forgive myself for once being so naive in love. Forgive myself for thinking I needed another person to be complete. I no longer feel an emptiness. I am complete by myself, but not alone. My life may be quieter now, but it is infinitely more peaceful. It is filled with small things: the smell of coffee in the morning, the satisfaction of watching my plants grow, the laughter of a client when she finally buys her first car with her own money, and of course, the sound of the waves, constantly whispering to me. The sky transformed into a canvas of oranges, pinks, and purples. For me, a new dawn arrived long ago, and every day I am grateful for that dawn, because I know how much I fought to get here. I no longer look back. The future stretches before me, as vast and beautiful as the ocean I contemplate, and for the first time in my life, I am not afraid to explore it alone. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.